The film begins when novelist Jennifer Hills decides to rent a secluded cabin in the Deep South to focus on completing her novel. On the way, she stops at a shop to get the key to the hut where she stays. At her shop, a man named Earl, the hut owner, gives her the keys and gives her directions there. The man said the hut was difficult to reach but the views and quietness were great. But the longer she traveled through the landscape, the more confused the girl became. She then decides to stop at a gas station to buy some gas, only to find 3 employees loitering there. Andy, Stanley, and Johnny try to court them, but are unsuccessful. Because this woman is everyone's job. Instead, she tells him where she's going and asks him to pinpoint the exact route to her own cabin, which she definitely shouldn't do. Noticing her girlish charm, Johnny tries to attack Jennifer, but she accidentally causes Johnny to spill a bucket of liquid, which is laughed at by her friends Andy and Stanley. As Jennifer drives away, Johnny's shyness is evident. After a long walk, Jennifer arrives at the not-so-scary shack that will be her home for the next few months. She quickly unpacks her luggage and immediately begins writing. The next day, as Jennifer is relaxing by the lake, she hears a noise coming from the woods. Perhaps just a crow, she doesn't pay much attention. Then she continues writing on the porch of the hut until she hears a noise coming from the hut. Curious, she went to the hut to see what was going on, but found nothing there but various tools and a container with the word poison written on it. The girl didn't move. Jennifer returns to her cabin and she soon accidentally spills wine on her shirt, which she ends up washing in the sink. Before she knew it, someone had videotaped her half naked. The next morning, while jogging, she finds an abandoned house and for some reason decides to explore it. But she didn't find anything interesting, she just lived her life. She then returned to her cabin and tried to take a bath, but had to abandon the idea because the water in the sink turned brown and the toilet clogged. Jennifer calls a plumber named Matthew and explains the problem. But if that wasn't bad enough, she dropped her phone in the bathroom and forced her to dry it with her hair dryer. A plumber, Matthew, arrives to fix the bathroom, but it turns out he has a speech impediment and mental retardation, and Jennifer suddenly kisses her to express her gratitude. In the woods, Andy, Stanley, and Johnny play with killing fish as a hobby while Stanley takes pictures. After leaving home, Matthew joins 3 men who were fishing in the nearby woods, who turn out to be his friends. Matthew tells Johnny that Jennifer kissed him, but Johnny doesn't believe him, so Stanley confirms that it was real. Eerily, Stanley shows a video he took of Jennifer last night, angering Johnny. He begins to say that girls like Jennifer want to have a good time and hints that she does something. Later that night, Jennifer continues to hear strange noises in her house, and she becomes more and more restless. Jennifer hears a knock on the door and finds a dead bird outside the door. The girl walks around the hut to see if anyone is there, but there is no one outside. But to her surprise, when she returned to her laptop, she found selfies of Johnny and his friends. As she begins to freak out, Johnny and his friends enter the room. Andy begins teasing her while Stanley has a handy camera. Johnny drags Matthew into the room, but he clearly doesn't approve of everything. A frightened Jennifer tries to tell her that her boyfriend is coming, but the men are undaunted. They even started harassing her, making fun of her for her writing and even throwing her lit matches at her. Johnny forces her to drink her booze, but to her horror she ends up drinking, while Matthew curls up in her corner and doesn't dare to protect her. Her scene becomes even more disturbing when Johnny asks her to show her teeth. Her initially confused her, but eventually she complied with his demands when he started threatening her with her baseball bat. He then took out a gun and stuffed it into her mouth. As the boys laugh at this, Andy approaches Jennifer, but this time she picks up a bottle and slams it into his lap, picks up pepper spray, and gives Stanley a chance to use it as he runs outside. Rice field. This allows her to escape into the woods and reach safety. While running through the woods, she encounters Earl, the town sheriff and cabin owner. In tears, she told all about her recent assault and asked for her help. The sheriff asks Earl to return and offers to accompany him to the cabin to rectify the situation. When they get there, they find that the cabin is empty and the sheriff begins to look around. But the sheriff, seeing her wheat seams and a cracked alcohol bottle, suddenly starts blaming her. He accuses her of not telling her the truth about what happened to her, and she has no right to make false accusations about men he's known since her childhood. The sheriff then conducts a strip test, which surprisingly is just her excuse to molest her. They are interrupted by Johnny and his friends who have just returned. The sheriff then begins attacking them as the rest of the men look on. When Matthew tried to fight back, Johnny strangled her and ripped off her pants, forcing Matthew to undress her. Matthew initially refuses, but eventually pulls off his pants in terror. Her men then hold her down, ordering Jennifer to hold her against herself until Matthew is satisfied while Stanley records the whole thing. Even in the midst of all this, Sheriff Psycho is brave enough to answer a phone call from his young daughter. Matthew then vents his mind, and moments later Jennifer summons what remains of her strength and flees into the woods. As she makes her way deeper into the woods, she encounters the group again, where more suffering awaits. Andy then pulled Jennifer near a puddle and dipped her head several times. As she fell to the ground, her sheriff, ignoring her cries of mercy, took off her pants and pressed her body against her. The guys then take turns with Jennifer while Stanley's cameras roll. Jennifer woke up to find that her whole body was dirty. She gets up and goes to the bridge over the river. We see her men casually tailing her and her sheriff trying to shoot her to protect her own skin, but she quickly throws herself into the water and disappears. They wait for her to appear, but she does not. There, they wandered down the river in the hope that her body would appear, but they arrived empty-handed. Upon hearing this, the sheriff panicked and ordered the boys to remove the car and all of their belongings from the shed and burn the tapes Stanley had taken. After an eventful day, the sheriff returns to his family, where his wife and daughter welcome him. He spends the night at home as if nothing had happened and doesn't regret his actions at all. The next day, the sheriff returns the keys to the cabin to the owner, only to explain that Jennifer has walked away and that Jennifer is a problem alcoholic. Over the next few days, the boys go about their lives as if nothing happened, but Matthew feels guilty about what he has done. He even imagines seeing Jennifer's ghost as he sits alone in the woods. A month later, the sheriff receives a call from Earl, the cabin owner, who tells him that a person named Barbara has been looking for Jennifer since she hasn't been seen for a month. Meanwhile, Stanley panicked and ran to his friends to say that someone had stolen his cell phone camera. Here he reveals that the handy camera kept a record of what they did to Jennifer and that he didn't burn the tape even though he was told to do so. This infuriates Johnny and he starts beating Stanley, but Andy calms him down. That night, as Johnny sits alone in front of the TV, he hears a knock on the door and finds a dead bird there. Confused, he backed away, only to hear another knock on the door. Enraged, he grabs his gun and rushes out after another bang, only to find one of Jennifer's sandals on the doorstep. He fires his gun hard in the air and runs towards the moving bushes on the other side of the yard, but he finds nothing. The next day, when the sheriff returns home, someone has sent his wife a tape that turns out to be the tape of Jennifer's rape. This causes him to go into a spiral and head to Johnny's apartment. There, an angry sheriff thinks he's playing a prank and confronts the three, especially Stanley. Johnny concludes that Matthew is the mastermind behind it all, as he is nowhere to be found. Later in the day, the sheriff goes hunting with Earl. While they were sitting and resting, he suddenly shot the poor old man dead. Earl witnessed the sheriff bring Jennifer back to the cabin, and he was one of the fugitives. Meanwhile, a guilt-ridden Matthew wakes up in an abandoned cabin to find Jennifer on the couch. Glad that she was still alive, he approached her and started crying, saying sorry for her. But of course that's not enough. She pulls out the rope and begins strangling him. That day, Stanley and Andy head into the woods in search of Matthew, but hear faint music and end up at the same abandoned house Jennifer found at the beginning of the film. Judging from the situation, it seems that someone lived there. Wandering alone, Stanley unexpectedly encounters Jennifer, and as he approaches, he is caught in a bear trap and lets out a cry of pain. This causes Andy to come to his aid, but is knocked out by Jennifer. Sometime later, when Stanley wakes up, he finds himself tied to a tree stump. Jennifer takes the time to video him and force-feed him a dead rat. She then stuck a hook through his eyelid and attached it to the stump. While picking up Stanley, Jennifer eviscerates the fish and spreads the entrails over Stanley's face. Many crows gather at the smell of fish guts and start pecking at it. After a while, his eyeballs were eaten by birds and he bled to death. Meanwhile, Andy wakes up to find himself tied to a board over his bathtub. The water in the bathtub continues to rise when Jennifer comes to check on her. Jennifer wastes no time and begins submerging Andy's head in water over and over, ignoring his pleas to release him. To make her more arousing for her, she pours acid into the water. She then removed her board from under him and forced him to bear her own weight if he didn't want to drown. And when he couldn't stand it anymore, he continued to submerge himself in acidic water until his death. Jennifer then visits Johnny at the gas station and stuns him with a speed wrench. Like the rest of his friends, Johnny wakes up naked and tied up with a team of horses hanging from his mouth. Jennifer tugs on her reins and starts pulling out her teeth. Jennifer realizes her mistake and she pees in her pants in terror. She then removed her reins and took out her gun, shoving it into his mouth. But as arrogant as ever, at least until she takes out a pair of scissors and cuts off her piss before shoving it into her mouth, he still has the audacity to laugh. Of course, Johnny bleeds to death, and yes, this scene is as harrowing as you can imagine. Across town, the sheriff receives a phone call from his daughter, who excitedly announces that a new teacher is visiting. When she gave the phone to her teacher, it turned out to be the best teacher he could find for her daughter, our beloved Jennifer. She introduces her own name to her sheriff in her confidence, but naturally the sheriff panics. Worried about his family's safety, the sheriff rushes home, only to discover that Jennifer's daughter has gone out to play. He immediately went looking for her daughter in the empty playground while she was still out of sight. However, when he returns to his car, Jennifer attacks him. When he wakes up, he finds himself in a cabin with a shotgun stuck in his butt. Jennifer then appears and begins to talk about how kind her daughter is and how she can withstand attacks on women. To torment him, Jennifer begins to plunge his barrel deeper. She then tied a string to her trigger, revealing her unconscious figure sitting across her room. It's none other than Matthew. She attaches the other end of the string to Matthew's wrist so she can pull the trigger when Matthew moves his arm. As Jennifer leaves, the sheriff begs for his life. After a while Matthew woke up and started moving his body. Before the sheriff can warn, the trigger is pulled and the two are shot dead, ending the film. End. In the chilling conclusion, Jennifer takes brutal revenge on her assailants, delivering a harrowing and ruthless fate to each of them. Justice is served, but the film leaves a haunting impression of the cycle of violence and the darkness that can consume human nature when pushed to extremes.